He woke up at 3 in the morning with his heart racing. It wasn't a nightmare. It was something worse. The sudden realization that all those years of following every impulse, every distraction, every click had not set him free. They had emptied something inside him, something he didn't even know had a name. There is a kind of tiredness that sleep cannot cure. You sleep 8 hours and wake up exhausted. You take a vacation and come back feeling emptier. You seek pleasure and feel nothing. Just a distant echo of satisfaction that lasts seconds before turning into guilt, anxiety, or a strange silence you can't name. Modernity has taught you a very specific lie. That freedom was the absence of limits. That authenticity was giving into every impulse the moment it appeared. That repressing any desire was a sign of pathological repression, fear of living, neurosis inherited from religious times that we should overcome. And while you believed that, while we all believed it, something silent was happening. You were getting weaker, not physically, energetically, existentially, because there is a hidden law that no one told you about, a law that modern culture deliberately hid because it threatens the entire structure of what you are conditioned to be, the law of inner transmutation. And it works like this: everything you don't waste, you concentrate. Everything you concentrate, you transform. And everything you transform becomes real power, not the power to dominate others, but the power to no longer be dominated by anything, by anyone. Not even by the most primitive version of yourself. Nietzsche said something disturbing. He who does not master himself is not free. But we were raised to believe the opposite. That self-control was imprisonment. That restraint was repression. That discipline was trauma in disguise. And this inversion was not accidental. It was strategic. Because an energetically exhausted population does not question. It does not create. It does not transcend. It only consumes. It only survives. It only accepts. The truth that no one wants you to discover is this: you have within you a vital force, a psychic, sexual, creative energy that is literally pure fuel for everything you could become. But this force only operates in 2 states, dispersed or concentrated. And the whole of modernity has been designed to keep it eternally dispersed. Because when you learn to concentrate this energy, something strange happens. You don't just become different, you become dangerous. Not violent, but free. And real freedom scares those who need you weak in order to function. So here's what you need to understand before we continue. This is not about morality. It's not about religion. It's not about denying the body or demonizing pleasure. It's about existential physics. It's about understanding that all force that is dispersed is lost, and all force that is concentrated dominates. The question is not whether this is true. Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, even Freud in his most lucid moments knew this. The question is, why was this never taught to you? The answer is simple and disturbing. Because they wanted you to remain controllable. Think about how many times just today you were exposed to triggers designed to activate your sexual energy. Your Instagram feed, YouTube ads, the series you watch before bed, the notification that lights up your phone screen at 11 p.m. with a suggestion for you. These are not coincidences. They are systems designed by behavioral engineers who perfectly understand how your brain's dopamine circuit works. They know that every time they activate your sexual energy, without allowing you to consciously direct it, you weaken. Not all at once, little by little, like invisible bleeding. And here's the genius of the deception. They don't call it control, they call it liberation. Be yourself, express your desires, don't repress anything. Free sexuality is healthy sexuality. It sounds progressive, it sounds emancipatory. But look at the result. An entire generation operating at 30% of their energy capacity, addicted to external validation, unable to sustain focus for more than 3 minutes, starting projects that never end, having ideas that never materialize, carrying chronic fatigue that no medical exam can explain. That's not freedom. It's slavery in new clothes. Nietzsche had a term for this: herdman. Not because you are stupid, but because you have been domesticated. And the most effective method of domestication ever invented is to make you believe that dispersing your life force is a sign of health, while concentrating it is pathological. They reversed everything. They called strength weakness. They called weakness authenticity. And you, all of us, bought the story. The sexual revolution of the 1960s promised to free humanity from the shackles of Victorian repression. And in part it succeeded. It broke necessary taboos, dismantled religious guilt that mutilated entire psyches. But something happened along the way. Liberation turned into permissiveness. Permissiveness turned into compulsion. And compulsion turned into a market. Today, the porn industry moves more money than the NFL, NBA, and MLB combined. Dating apps have turned intimacy into a fast-moving consumer product. Human sexual attention itself has become a tradable commodity. And you? You became a consumer, not a citizen, not a creator, a consumer of stimuli designed to keep you in an endless loop of activation and depletion. Think of the simplest metaphor possible, a river. Sexual energy is like a powerful river flowing through you. Now, if that river flows freely without obstacles, without direction, it spreads across the land, creates swamps, evaporates in the sun, loses strength. You may even enjoy the momentary sensation of the water flowing. It's pleasurable, it's natural, but it doesn't generate anything. It moves nothing. It builds nothing. But what happens when you put a dam on that river? The water doesn't disappear. It accumulates. It creates pressure. And that pressure, when directed, generates electricity capable of lighting entire cities. The river was not denied. It was elevated. Its force was not repressed. It was transmuted. This is the secret they kept hidden from you. Strategic containment is not neurotic repression. It is existential alchemy. And there is a historical reason why this has been hidden. Every established power structure, whether religious, political, or economic, has always known that individuals with concentrated sexual energy are dangerous, not violent, but uncontrollable. They are the ones who lead revolutions, who create art that shakes structures, who build companies that destroy monopolies, who think thoughts that threaten dogmas. Concentrated sexual energy does not only generate creativity, it generates nonconformity, it generates courage, it generates the ability to say no to what everyone accepts as inevitable. That is why, throughout history, whenever a power structure wanted to control populations, it had two options: to totally repress sexuality, an ancient religious method, or to overstimulate it to the point of exhaustion, a modern method. Both lead to the same place: individuals without enough energy to question, to create, to transcend. The difference is that total repression generates visible revolt, but overstimulation, it generates invisible conformity. You think you are free because no one forbids you anything, but you don't have the energy to use this freedom creatively, so you use it compulsively. And compulsion is never freedom. Nietzsche predicted this when he warned about the last man, the human being who wants only comfort, immediate pleasure, and the absence of challenge. The last man winks and says, "We invented happiness, but it is a mediocre happiness, small, safe, and completely powerless." And here's what no one tells you about this process. It hurts. At first, it hurts a lot, because your body has been conditioned, literally conditioned at the neurological level, to seek immediate release. Your brain has associated instant sexual pleasure with stress relief, validation, escape. So when you start to contain that energy, everything inside you rebels. Your body begs, your mind justifies, your culture says you're repressing yourself. And most people give up here, because they interpret the discomfort as a sign that they're doing something wrong. But you're not doing anything wrong. You're doing something your system never expected. You're saying no to biology's most primitive impulse, and that creates internal chaos. Schopenhauer called this the blind will, the unconscious force that drives all life, which wants only to perpetuate itself, to consume, to reproduce, with no greater purpose. And when you try to master this will, it does not accept it passively. It fights back, because you are, for the first time, putting consciousness where before there was only automation. You are not repressing, you are waking up. And here is the harshest truth. Modern culture needs you to remain asleep, because a person who controls their sexual energy is no longer manipulated by advertisements that promise happiness through consumption. They are no longer dependent on validation that can be sold as a product. They are no longer fragile enough to accept underemployment, mediocre relationships, a small life. You become someone who chooses, and real choice, choice that comes from concentrated inner strength, is dangerous to any system that depends on conformity. That's why they taught you that giving in to every impulse was liberation. Because as long as you leak energy, you don't have the power to create anything that threatens the status quo. You become a passive consumer of your own life rather than an active architect of it. The question no one asks is, who profits from your weakness? Who benefits when you are energetically bankrupt, emotionally dependent, psychologically fragmented? The answer is everyone who needs to sell something to fill the void. And the void only exists because you continue to leak what you should be concentrating. But what happens when you stop leaking? You wake up with a finite amount of energy. This is not a metaphor. It is neurobiological reality. Schopenhauer understood this when he spoke of will as a limited life force that needed to be managed. Every decision you make, every impulse you give into, every distraction you allow, all of this drains from that reserve. And at the end of the day, you don't have the energy for what really matters, for the project, for the difficult conversation, for the decision that would change everything. You're exhausted, and you accept it as normal. But look at a typical day. You pick up your phone before you even get out of bed. First mistake. Before you've even set your intention for the day, you're already reacting. You open Instagram. 3 minutes of scrolling. 12 subtly sexualized images. Your brain releases dopamine. Your nervous system activates. Your sexual energy awakens, but without direction, without purpose. Just activated and then nothing. It doesn't materialize into action, into creation, into real connection. It stays there, suspended, creating low-level anxiety that you don't even consciously notice. You go to work. Notification. Advertisement. Conversation that triggers fantasy. Memory that comes out of nowhere. All of this is consuming mental processing. You think you're just living the day, but you're operating with 10 tabs open in the browser of your consciousness, each one draining your battery. By 2 p.m., you're already mentally exhausted, and you haven't even started what really matters. There is a concept in energy psychology called decision fatigue. Every choice you make, no matter how small, consumes brain glucose. That's why Steve Jobs wore the same outfit every day. That's why Obama reduced trivial decisions to zero. They understood that mental energy is finite. But here's what no one connects. Sexual energy and mental energy come from the same source. When you activate your sexual energy repeatedly throughout the day without ever directing it towards something creative, you're doing worse than deciding between 10 types of coffee. You're turning the most powerful engine in your body on and off without ever putting it into actual motion. It's like stepping on the gas pedal of a stationary car. You consume fuel, generate heat, make noise, but you don't move. And in the end, when you really need to drive, the tank is empty. At night, you should be creating, writing, building, planning, but you have no energy, so you fall into compensation. More scrolling, more series, more passive content that demands nothing from you, but also gives you nothing in return. And you go to sleep thinking it was a normal day. It was, and that's the problem. Because normal today means living at 30% of your energy capacity and thinking that's all you have. The architecture of modern depletion is brilliant precisely because it's invisible. You don't feel the energy being drained in the moment. You only feel the consequences. Chronic procrastination, lack of focus, creativity that never appears, relationships that remain superficial because you don't have the energy for depth, cynicism that grows because it's easier to criticize than to create when you're energetically bankrupt. And here's what scares you when you really understand this. It's not that you're lazy or untalented or destined for mediocrity. It's that you're trying to build an extraordinary life with survival energy, like trying to win a marathon while donating blood every mile. Obviously, you won't make it, but the problem was never your ability. It was the bleeding you didn't even know was happening. Think about the people around you. How many of them live with that constant exhaustion, that never-ending fatigue, that feeling of always running but never arriving? How many have dreams that have been tucked away in a drawer for years because they don't have time, don't have energy? It's not the right moment. The honest answer is most. And most accept this as inevitable, like adult life, but it's not. It's the direct result of operating with scattered energy. Nietzsche said that modern man is too human, stuck in his baser needs, incapable of transcendence because he spends all his energy just keeping himself functioning on an animal level. And he was describing exactly that. The difference between existing and living, between surviving and creating, between being moved and moving. When you continuously disperse sexual energy, you are always being moved by the algorithm, by impulse, by advertising, by habit. You don't choose, you react. And reaction builds nothing worthwhile. There is a disturbing statistic. The average smartphone user touches their device 2,617 times a day. 2,617 times. Each tap is a micro-decision. Each notification is a micro-activation. Each scroll is a micro-dispersion. Add it all up and you have a perfect system of psychological fragmentation. You are never whole. You are never present. You are never focused long enough to generate anything of real value. And the tragedy is that you think it's just you. You look at people on social media and they seem fine, productive, happy. But it's performance. Behind the curation, there is the same exhaustion, the same dispersion, the same emptiness disguised as a full schedule. But here's what no one prepared you to understand. When you stop dispersing that energy, it doesn't just store itself peacefully inside you. It turns inward and it creates pressure, psychological pressure, existential pressure. Like closing all the escape valves on a boiler, the pressure builds. And if you don't know what to do with it, if you don't understand that this is part of the process, you panic. Your body will say, this isn't natural, this isn't healthy. Release the pressure. Your mind will create elaborate justifications for why you should return to your old patterns. Everyone does it. It's biological. You're being radical. A little won't hurt. Your culture will validate these thoughts with 1,000 voices. And most people at this very point give up. They interpret the pressure as a mistake, as a sign that they should stop. But this pressure, this is the raw material of transformation. Schopenhauer understood this better than anyone. He saw suffering as inherent in existence, not as punishment but as structure. But he also saw that there were two kinds of suffering. The suffering of dispersion. You suffer, but you don't grow. You are in pain, but it is meaningless, directionless pain that only generates more pain. And the suffering of restraint. You suffer, but you transform. The pain has a purpose. It forges you. It rebuilds you. It makes you capable of enduring what would have broken you before. The difference is that one leads to despair and the other leads to power. One fragments you into 1,000 pieces. The other unites you into a single force. And here is the truth you need to face. You will suffer anyway. That is the human condition. The only choice you have is to suffer scattered, weak, reactive, at the mercy of every impulse and every algorithm, or to suffer focused, strong, conscious, building something that justifies the pain. The question remains, are you willing to endure the pressure long enough to find out what it turns into? Because here's what happens in the first few days, in the first few weeks. None of what you were promised. No sudden clarity, no superpowers, no sense of being in control. What you feel is the opposite. You feel chaos. The energy that once had a predictable outlet, a programmed release, is now trapped inside you with nowhere to go. And your entire organism goes on high alert, as if something were wrong, as if you were denying a vital need. Because to your body, you are. It has been trained, conditioned by years of repetition to expect release. And now you are saying no. In the first 3 days, it's just physical discomfort, restlessness. You feel the energy circulating aimlessly, looking for the escape valve that has always been there. Your body asks for it, not with words, with sensations, with intrusive thoughts that come out of nowhere, with justifications that your own mind creates to convince you that just once won't make a difference. But it does, because it's not about frequency. It's about breaking the pattern, and the pattern is smart. It knows that if it can make you give in once, it can make you give in every time. In the first week, the chaos intensifies. Your mind starts to negotiate. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe this is just repression. Other people don't do this and they're fine. Why do I have to be so radical? And these voices sound perfectly rational because they come from within. You trust them, but they are not you. They are the old pattern fighting to survive. You start to notice strange things. Your attention becomes hyper-stimulated. Details that were previously invisible now jump out at you. A random image on the internet, a casual scene on the street, a memory that pops up uninvited. Everything seems designed to remind you of what you are holding back. And in a way it is, because your brain, desperate for the dopaminergic reward it has always received, is now hypervigilant to any trigger that might justify its release. It's like quitting smoking and suddenly realizing that everyone around you smokes. They always smoked. You just didn't pay attention. Now you do, because your system is looking for any excuse to return to familiar comfort. Nietzsche had a devastating phrase for this. He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself becomes not a monster. And when you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. But what he didn't say, and what you discover for yourself, is that the monster isn't out there. It's in here. It's the primitive version of you that has always been in control. And now you're taking that control away from it. It's a psychological civil war. And you're fighting an army that knows all your weaknesses, all your escape routes, all your favorite excuses. Worse, this army uses your own voice, your own memories, your own rationalizations, like betraying yourself without realizing you're being betrayed. In the second week, something worse happens. The internal pressure doesn't subside, it intensifies. Because the energy is building up with no outlet, no dissipation, and if you don't know what to do with it, it turns into anxiety, irritability, insomnia, obsessive thoughts. Your body literally doesn't know how to process this amount of concentrated energy. It's never had to do this before. You wake up in the middle of the night with your heart racing. It wasn't a nightmare. It was pure pressure looking for an outlet. You sit down to work and can't focus because the energy is moving inside you like a caged animal. You talk to someone and feel disproportionate irritation at insignificant things. Not because the person did something wrong, but because you are in the process of internal fusion and any external stimulus seems unbearable. And this is where most people give up, because they interpret these symptoms as proof that they are doing something wrong. My body is telling me that this is not healthy. No, your body is telling you that this is new, and everything new generates resistance before it generates transformation. Think of a muscle that has never been used. When you start training it, it hurts, Not because the training is wrong, but because the muscle is being forced to do something it has never done before. The pain is the adaptation process, and if you stop at the pain, you never develop the muscle. It remains atrophied, comfortable, but weak. The same is true of energy containment. The pressure, the discomfort, the mental chaos. These are not signs of error. They are signs of reconstruction. Your nervous system is learning to operate at a different frequency. Your mind is being forced to find new paths for energy that previously had only one destination. And this does not happen smoothly. It happens through crisis. And it hurts. Schopenhauer did not romanticize this pain. He saw it for exactly what it was. Real suffering, but necessary suffering. Because all transcendence requires death. Death of the old version. And death is never comfortable. You don't evolve in peace. You evolve in crisis. The butterfly does not emerge from the chrysalis without a struggle. The struggle is what strengthens its wings. Without it, the butterfly dies on its first flight. There is a specific moment, usually between the 10th and 14th day, when temptation peaks. It is not simple physical desire. It is psychological, existential. It is the feeling that you are depriving yourself of something essential, that you are wasting time, that you could be living instead of restricting yourself. And this narrative is so convincing that it seems like absolute truth. It seems like wisdom from the body. It seems like self-care, but it's not. It's the last attempt by the old pattern to maintain control, like a wounded animal making one last attack before being subdued. If you give in here, you're back to square one. Not because you sinned or failed, but because you reinforced the neural circuit you were trying to break. And then you have to start all over again. And starting over after getting so close is psychologically devastating. But if you don't give in, if you get through that peak of pressure without opening the valve, something extraordinary starts to happen. The energy stops fighting to escape, and it starts to reorganize itself, like water that finally accepts the dam and starts flowing through the channels you built instead of the ones it was used to. You don't realize it at the moment, because you're still in the middle of the chaos. You still feel the pressure. You still wake up some days thinking you won't make it. But molecularly, neurochemically, energetically, you are transmuting. Lead is turning into gold. You just can't see it yet because you're inside the furnace, and no one sees gold while it's in the fire. And here's the truth that no one prepares you for. You can't skip this phase. There's no shortcut. There's no hack. There's no way to have the transmutation without going through the dark night. Every great alchemist, every philosopher who understood this process, every individual who truly transformed, went through this night, without exception, without privilege. The difference between those who transform and those who give up is not talent. It is not supernatural willpower. It is understanding. Those who understand that chaos is the mechanism, not the problem, manage to get through it. Those who interpret chaos as a mistake give up halfway and return to comfortable mediocrity. So when you feel the pressure, and you will feel it, remember, this is not the end of the process, it's the middle. It's the melting point. The alchemist doesn't turn off the fire when the metal starts to melt. He keeps it going. He increases it, because he knows that melting is necessary for transmutation. No heat, no transformation, no pressure, no power. The question is not whether it will hurt. It will. The question is, will you interpret the pain as failure or as forging? And then, without warning, something changes. It's not dramatic. There is no moment of mystical revelation where everything suddenly makes sense. It's subtle. You wake up on any given day. It could be the 15th, it could be the 23rd, and you realize that the pressure is different. It hasn't disappeared, but you're no longer struggling to escape it. It's circulating, as if you found an inner path you didn't even know existed. Your focus changes first. You sit down to work and realize you can sustain your attention for 40 minutes without interruption, then an hour, then 2, without conscious effort, without forced discipline, as if something inside you has stopped fighting against itself and started cooperating. The fragmentation that was normal, that feeling of always being torn between what you should be doing and what your impulse wants to do, begins to disappear. You become one, not perfectly, but noticeably. And that changes everything, because for the first time you experience what it's like to operate with concentrated energy. And it's so different from anything you've known that it feels like an altered state of consciousness. But it's not altered. It is the natural state. What you called normal before was the altered state, fragmented, scattered, at the mercy of every stimulus. This is how you should have always operated. Creativity comes next. Ideas that used to require hours of forced brainstorming begin to appear spontaneously, in the shower, on a walk, in the silence before bed. And these aren't ordinary ideas. They're connections you would never have made before, as if your mind had accessed a deeper level of processing, because it has. The energy that used to leak out is now feeding neural circuits that have been dormant for years, perhaps for your entire life. You begin to solve problems that previously stumped you, not because you've become smarter, but because you have enough energy to sustain complex thinking for as long as necessary. Intelligence is not just ability, it's also endurance. And endurance requires fuel. Now you have it. Nietzsche called this sublimation, the process by which primitive instincts are transformed into higher abilities. It is not a denial of instinct, it is an elevation. The artist does not deny eros, he transforms it into art. The philosopher does not deny aggression, he transforms it into penetrating thought that cuts through illusions. The entrepreneur does not deny sexual ambition, he transmutes it into creative ambition that builds empires. And you begin to feel this not as abstract theory, but as visceral lived experience. The energy that once demanded immediate release now demands creative expression. Your body no longer wants to disperse, it wants to build. It no longer wants to consume passively, it wants to create actively. It's as if you've discovered that your car's engine has 3 more gears you've never used. Physically, strange things begin to happen. You sleep less, but wake up more rested, as if your sleep has become more efficient. Your gaze is different, more direct, more present, more penetrating. You notice this when you look in the mirror. There is something different in your eyes, a clarity that wasn't there before. Your voice gains weight, not volume, weight. People listen when you speak, even when you speak softly. There is a density to your presence that wasn't there before. Your posture changes without you trying. You move with more intention, less wasted movement, less bodily anxiety. You occupy space differently, not aggressively, but also not apologetically. Just present, just solid. But it is in social situations that the transformation becomes undeniable. You walk into a room and something has changed. People look at you differently, not with superficial curiosity that soon passes, with real attention that remains. Conversations that previously required effort to maintain flow naturally. People who previously ignored you begin to seek your opinion, and you are not doing anything different externally. You haven't changed your appearance. You haven't learned charisma techniques. You're not trying to impress. But something invisible has changed, and others feel it. They always feel it, because energy does not lie. This is not magic. It is bioenergetics. When you operate with concentrated energy, you emit a different frequency, and the nervous systems of the people around you respond to that frequency even before there is verbal interaction. They feel that you are not leaking, that you don't need them to feel complete, that you are not seeking validation. And paradoxically, this makes you irresistibly interesting. Schopenhauer understood this as the influence of concentrated will on scattered wills. It's not conscious. It's not strategy. It's energetic. Your presence affects the emotional field around you without you having to do anything. Just being focused is already influence. Just existing without leaking is already power. Professionally, opportunities begin to appear. Not because you are manifesting with positive thinking, but because you are operating with mental clarity that makes you make better decisions, communicate ideas more accurately, persist in projects that you would have abandoned at the first obstacle before. Your work improves objectively, and when your work improves, the world responds. You get the promotion you've been waiting for months, or someone offers you the partnership you didn't even know you wanted, or the project you started finally takes off after months of stagnation. Not because of cosmic luck, but because you finally have the energy you need to perform at the level the opportunity demands. The opportunity was always there. You just didn't have the fuel to take advantage of it. But here's what no one tells you. This transformation comes with an invisible cost. Because when you transmute, you don't just gain power, you gain perception. And perception isn't always comfortable. You begin to see patterns that were previously invisible. In others, in yourself, in culture, in social structures, in relationships. And what you see is not always pretty. You realize how much of ordinary human interaction is an exchange of validation disguised as conversation. How much of modern entertainment is sedation disguised as fun. How much of sexual liberation is emotional dependence disguised as authenticity. How much of friendships are habit disguised as connection. And you can no longer unsee it. You can no longer feign innocence. Consciousness, once expanded, does not return to its previous size. And there is a particular loneliness in that, because you can no longer relate to the world in the same way. Superficial conversations become unbearable. Environments that once stimulated you now drain you. The people you used to spend time with start to feel like strangers, not because they've changed, but because you've changed. And change creates inevitable distance, neither good nor bad, just real. If you're going through this right now, this painful transmutation, this internal chaos that precedes order, there's a simple practice that speeds up the process and organizes the energy that's reorganizing within you. It's a 5-minute method based on shadow integration and mental clarity that Nietzsche and Jung would have approved of. It helps you channel the internal pressure into conscious creation instead of letting it turn into diffuse anxiety. You can find the complete guide in the first pinned comment. It's not mandatory. But if you're serious about getting through this phase without giving up, it could be the difference between real transformation and yet another abandoned attempt. Because transmutation is not linear. There are days when you feel the power. There are days when you feel only emptiness. There are days when you question whether it was worth it. But the general trend is upward. You are climbing a mountain, and climbing is always more tiring than staying on the ground. It always hurts more. It always demands more. But the view from the top, the view that only those who climb can see, justifies every difficult step, every moment of doubt, every dark night endured, and then you realize there is no turning back. Even if you wanted to, you couldn't. You no longer want to live at the old frequency, even with the loneliness, even with the weight of lucidity, even with the incomprehension of those left behind. Because for the first time in your life, you are not being moved by external forces. You are moving by internal force. And that sovereignty over yourself is worth any price that was charged. But the strangest is yet to come. Because this change in your energy, this concentration you have built through chaos and transmutation, it does not remain contained within you as a well-kept secret. It leaks out. Not like before, when it leaked out through unconscious dispersion, but through conscious radiation, like heat that a naturally heated body emits effortlessly. You don't control it, you don't choose it, it just happens. Like gravity, like magnetism, like any natural force that doesn't need permission to exist. And people feel it. There is a kind of attention you receive when you are energetically focused that is unlike anything else you have ever experienced. It is not distant admiration. It is not simple superficial sexual attraction. It is something more primitive, more instinctive, more real. People want to be close to you without knowing why. They want to hear what you have to say even when you're not saying anything particularly profound. They want you to be part of their moments. They want your approval without you having done anything consciously to deserve that social weight. And you notice it in small details first. The person at the supermarket checkout looks you in the eye and smiles. Not the automatic customer service smile they give to everyone. A real smile that reaches their eyes. The coworker who always ignored you now greets you in the hallway. The group you approach doesn't close the circle defensively. It opens up. Conversations that used to die after 2 minutes now naturally stretch out for half an hour. And you haven't changed the way you talk. You haven't learned rapport techniques. You're not using any social strategies. But something in your presence has fundamentally changed. And that something is magnetic. Schopenhauer would say that your concentrated will is influencing the wills around you in a direct, non-verbal way. That energy is not a poetic metaphor. It is physical reality operating below the conscious level, at the level of instincts. When you are focused, you emit a frequency of internal coherence. And coherence attracts. It always has attracted. It always will attract. Because in a world of fragmented people, someone who is whole stands out like a beacon in the dark night. In work meetings, you notice that when you speak, people stop what they are doing. They literally stop. They close their laptops. They put down their cell phones. They look at you. Not because you spoke louder than the others, but because your words have a density that the others don't have. They don't sound like empty opinions trying to fill an awkward silence. They sound like truth distilled from real experience. And people instinctively respect that, even when they disagree. Especially when they disagree. Decisions that used to ignore you now consult you. Projects you propose receive unexpected support. People offer help without you asking. And you haven't changed jobs. You haven't gained more formal authority. But you have gained real authority. The kind that comes from presence, not position. The kind that no one can give you or take away. The kind you build by going through internal fire. In personal relationships, the effect is even more dramatic and sometimes even disturbing in its intensity. People who once saw you as one option among many now see you as their only priority. The person you've been interested in for months suddenly shows clear and unmistakable signs of attraction. They seek you out. They make excuses to talk to you. They seek physical contact. They look at you differently. Not because you've done anything different externally. Not because you've used seduction techniques, but because you've stopped needing it. And when you stop needing validation from others, you paradoxically become necessary to them. It's a cruel paradox of human nature. The less you seek validation, the more validation you receive. The less you pursue, the more you are pursued. The less you care about being chosen, the more you are chosen. Not because the universe is fair, but because need repels and fulfillment attracts. And here's what this reveals about the common human condition. Most people operate in a state of constant energetic deprivation. They compulsively leak attention. They leak presence through distraction. They leak power through emotional dependence. And they unconsciously seek someone who is not leaking to absorb some of the stability they lack. When you concentrate energy, you automatically become that person. Not because you want to be a savior, but because there is no way not to be a reference when everyone around you is lost. You become the center. Not in an egotistical or narcissistic way, but structurally, gravitationally. People naturally begin to position you as the axis of social interactions. They make jokes to make you laugh. They tell impressive stories to impress you. They ask for advice on personal decisions that don't even directly involve you, because in some instinctive way that even they don't understand, they feel that you have something they don't. Clarity where they have confusion, direction where they have drift, presence where they have absence. Nietzsche spoke of the Übermensch, the beyond man, not as someone genetically superior or chosen by destiny, but as someone who has mastered himself to the point of transcending collective mediocrity. Someone who no longer needs the approval of the herd because they have built internal approval. And although Nietzsche never directly connected this to sexual energy restraint, the principle is exactly the same. Those who master their most primitive impulses master their own destiny, and those who master their own destiny naturally influence the destiny of others, whether they want to or not. But there is a dark side to this that no one mentions when talking about magnetism. This power, this attraction that you generate without conscious effort, comes with an implicit and heavy responsibility. Because people don't know they are reacting to your concentrated energy. They don't understand the mechanism. They just feel an inexplicable attraction. And misunderstood attraction can turn into toxic dependence. They may start to seek in you the emotional stability they should be building in themselves. And if you're not careful, you can become an emotional crutch for people who should be learning to walk on their own. You need to learn to measure your presence, to be available without becoming a compulsive savior, to influence without manipulating to feel powerful. Because power without ethics is tyranny. And you have power now. Real power, not performative, not superficial. And misused power doesn't just corrupt the people you influence, it corrupts you. It turns you into exactly the kind of person you despised before you started this journey. Magnetism also inevitably creates envy and hostility in some. Not everyone will like your transformation. Some will feel a visceral threat because your focused presence exposes by pure unintentional contrast their dispersion. Your clarity illuminates their confusion. Your direction highlights their drift. And instead of using you as inspiration to change as well, they will use you as a target to project their frustration. They will create narratives about you. They will question your motivations with suspicion. They will try to pull you back to the mediocre level where you were, because it is psychologically easier to pull someone down than to do the hard work of climbing up to where that person is. And you need to be prepared for that. For the loneliness that inevitably comes with elevation, for the misunderstanding that accompanies real transformation, for the fact that not everyone will celebrate your evolution. Some will attack it with venom disguised as concern, and you can't let that make you go back to where you were. Because going back now after seeing what you've seen, feeling what you felt, becoming who you've become, would be existential betrayal. Not against others, against yourself. But here's the reward that makes up for all the cost. The right people will also feel your magnetism. And those people, the ones who are on the same path of transformation, who intuitively understand what you've been through without needing an explanation, will naturally draw closer. Not out of neediness, but out of mutual recognition. And these connections are completely different from anything you've known before. They are deep, they are real, they are sustainable. Because they are between whole people, not between desperate fragments seeking impossible completeness in the other. You will form relationships that were literally impossible before, because before you didn't have the energy to sustain them. Deep relationships require sustained presence, and sustained presence requires abundant, concentrated energy. Now you have it. And that radically changes the type of person you attract and the type of connection you create. Magnetism is not the ultimate goal of this journey. It never was. It is just an inevitable byproduct. The real goal is sovereignty over yourself. But sovereignty inevitably generates influence over others. And influence, when used ethically and consciously, generates real impact in the world. And impact is what differentiates those who merely passed through life from those who truly transformed it. Even if it is a small local transformation in a few lives around them. You didn't seek this when you started. You just wanted to control your impulses. But now that you have this magnetic power, you need to consciously decide what to do with it. Because neutrality does not exist. You will influence. The only choice is in which direction. But make no mistake, this transformation, this transmutation from slave to impulses to sovereign of oneself comes at a price, and the price is irreversible. Because when you go through this journey, when you really focus your energy and awaken to a different frequency of existence, you can no longer pretend you don't know. You can no longer return to the comfortable innocence of those who never questioned. You can no longer blend in naturally with those who are still asleep. Consciousness, once expanded by direct experience, never returns to its previous size. Never. Nietzsche had a brutal warning about this. He who has a why to live can bear anyhow, but who bears the weight of knowing? Because knowing, really knowing, not just intellectually knowing, changes you permanently. And not all change is cause for celebration. Some change is mourning. Mourning for who you were, for where you belonged, for those who still understood you. You begin to realize that most people live in a kind of collective somnambulism. They wake up, react to the stimuli of the day, disperse their energy in 1,000 directions, return home exhausted, consume distraction until they fall asleep and start over. And they call this life. They think this is all there is, that there is no alternative, that this is just the way it is. And before you thought so too, you accepted the narrative. You participated in the collective ritual of dispersion. But now you know there is another way. And that knowledge separates you definitively and painfully. The conversations that once satisfied you now suffocate you, because you realize that most people aren't really talking. They're just waiting for their turn to talk about themselves. They're not seeking real connection. They're seeking mutual validation of superficial narratives that keep both parties comfortably asleep. And you can no longer participate in this game with the same lightness as before. Not because you've become elitist, but because every empty conversation costs you energy that you now know is precious, that is finite. That could be used to create something real, to build something that matters, to truly connect with someone who is also awake. The environments that once stimulated you now drain you violently. The party that was fun is now a sensory assault designed to fragment your attention and activate your most primitive impulses. The social gathering that was networking is now a theater of masks where everyone performs an edited version of themselves. The TV series that was entertainment is now sophisticated anesthesia to numb the existential emptiness that everyone carries but no one wants to name. You see all this with disturbing clarity, and you can't unsee it. And that isolates you even when you're physically surrounded by people. There is a specific loneliness that comes with lucidity. It is the loneliness of someone who woke up in a room full of sleeping people. You can scream, you can shake them, you can try to explain what you see, but those who are sleeping cannot hear you from inside their dreams. To them, you are just an annoying noise that disturbs their comfortable sleep, and eventually you stop trying to wake others up, not out of arrogance, not out of resignation, out of exhaustion, and out of genuine respect for everyone's time. Because you remember perfectly well what it was like to be asleep and have someone try to wake you up before it was time. You just resisted more. You sank deeper into sleep. Schopenhauer understood this loneliness better than any other philosopher. He saw that the more you develop consciousness, the more you distance yourself from the masses. Not because you are morally or intellectually superior, but because you are operating on a different frequency. And different frequencies do not resonate. They can coexist in the same space, but they do not mix. They do not harmonize. It is existential physics. It is not moral judgment. It is just the structural reality of expanded consciousness. And here's what no one prepares you for when they sell you the idea of awakening. Some relationships will not survive your transformation. Friendships that seemed rock solid will turn out to be built on shared habit, not real connection. People you genuinely loved will begin to feel threatened by your change, because your evolution highlights by pure contrast their stagnation. And no one likes a mirror that shows what they would rather keep invisible. You will lose people, and it will hurt. It will hurt more than you can imagine right now. Not because you coldly abandoned them, but because you no longer fit the role they needed you to play in order for them to feel comfortable with themselves. You were the friend who was always up for going out and burning off energy together. The colleague who accepted mediocrity without question because questioning it would be uncomfortable for everyone. The partner who didn't demand depth because depth scares those who live on the surface. And now you are no longer any of those versions. And they will accuse you of having changed, of having become different, of thinking you are better than others. And they will be absolutely right. You have changed. You are different. You are no longer who you were. Not better in the moral sense that implies superiority, but different in the structural sense that implies incompatibility. You no longer operate on the same value system. You no longer seek the same things. You no longer tolerate the same dynamics. And that fundamental incompatibility of frequencies hurts viscerally. It hurts more than the dark night of initial restraint, because the dark night was a struggle against yourself, against your own internal standards. This is mourning for connections that no longer exist in the way they used to. It is watching relationships you valued slowly dissolve, not because someone did something wrong, but because you simply no longer inhabit the same inner world. And there are days when you will sincerely ask yourself if it was worth it. If it wouldn't have been infinitely easier to have stayed asleep with everyone else. If all this lucidity isn't just another form of suffering disguised as evolution. If you haven't traded one type of comfortable prison for another type of solitary confinement. And those days are the most dangerous, because they are the days when the temptation to go back is strongest, not the temptation to disperse energy. You've already overcome that phase. But the temptation to pretend you don't see what you see, to perform strategic unconsciousness in order to belong again, to make yourself smaller to fit into the old spaces, to betray your own lucidity in exchange for company. And this temptation is 1,000 times more seductive than the original temptation of impulses, because you are not choosing between pleasure and discipline. You are choosing between truth and belonging. But you can't, because once you see, you can't unsee. Once you feel what it's like to operate with concentrated energy, you can no longer tolerate chronic fragmentation. Once you experience sovereignty over yourself, you can no longer accept slavery to impulses, algorithms, and the expectations of others that kept you small and controllable. So you stick with lucidity, and with the loneliness that inevitably comes with it, and with the weight of knowing that most people around you will never really understand what you've been through. They will never value what you have achieved, because to them you just became strange, distant, changed, boring, radical. And there is no argument that will convince someone who does not want to see. But here is the ultimate truth that you discover deep within that existential loneliness. You don't need them to understand. You no longer need external validation to confirm your internal reality, because the sovereignty you built by going through fire is self-sufficient by nature. It doesn't depend on an audience. It doesn't depend on recognition. It doesn't depend on anyone applauding or giving you a medal. It exists because you forged it, and no one can take that away from you. And that radical independence from the validation of others is real freedom. Not the false freedom propagated by modernity, which is just a license to give in to every impulse, but the genuine freedom to no longer be moved, manipulated, or controlled by anything external to you. To choose your path based on internal values that you have consciously built, not on social pressures that have been imposed on you. To live authentically from the inside out, not performatively from the outside in. And when you achieve this, when you finally understand with your whole being that the loneliness of lucidity is infinitely preferable to the noisy company of collective unconsciousness, something profound is resolved within you. The pain does not magically disappear, but its nature changes completely. It ceases to be pain that fragments and becomes pain that forges. It ceases to be meaningless suffering and becomes sacrifice with purpose. It becomes the price you consciously, willingly pay for a life that is truly worth living, even if absolutely no one else understands why you do what you do. The price of sovereignty is high, very high, but the price of slavery, of a whole life lived scattered, fragmented, asleep at the mercy of every impulse and algorithm, is infinitely higher. It's your entire life. It's everything you could have been. And when you put those two prices side by side with brutal honesty, the choice becomes crystal clear, painfully clear, undeniably obvious. You pay the price of transformation once, but you pay the price of mediocrity every day until you die. And then you arrive here, at this exact moment, at this existential crossroads with no turning back. Because now you know, you really know, not as an abstract concept you read somewhere, but as a visceral truth you felt in every word of this script. You know that the energy you wasted without thinking is the same life force that could be building the life you always knew was possible, but never had the courage to truly try. You know that every impulse you impulsively act on is a conscious vote for mediocrity. You know that the seductive modern promise of liberation through infinite gratification is actually the most efficient and invisible prison ever invented by the culture of control. You know that you have within you a dormant power, a concentrated force, that the overwhelming majority of people will never awaken because they have a visceral fear of the discomfort necessary to activate it. You know all this now, and knowing makes you irrevocably responsible. Because from this precise moment on, if you continue to disperse your vital energy through old patterns, it will no longer be out of innocent ignorance. It will be by conscious and cowardly choice. It will be because you have decided that the temporary comfort of immediate gratification is worth more than the permanent transformation of your entire being. It will be because you deliberately chose comfortable illusion over uncomfortable truth. And conscious choices, those you cannot undo later by saying I didn't know. Nietzsche said with surgical precision, "Become who you are." And what that really means is that there is no perfect ideal version of you waiting patiently somewhere in the distant future. There is no magical moment when everything will align perfectly and the transformation will be easy and painless. There is only you right now exactly as you are, with the energy you have available at this moment, making micro choices every second that inexorably bring you closer to or further away from who you have the potential to be. Every moment is forging or erosion, construction or destruction, concentration or dispersion, evolution or regression. There is no neutrality possible. There is no pause in the game. You are always choosing, even when you think you are not choosing anything. And here is the most liberating and simultaneously most frightening truth there is. No one will do this for you. No enlightened guru, no perfect system, no magic technique that bypasses the inner work. You will have to go through the dark night of restraint completely alone. You will have to endure the growing psychological pressure without opening the escape valve you have always used. You will have to endure the incomprehensive judgment of those who do not understand and will never understand. You will have to accept the inevitable loneliness of expanded lucidity. You will have to pay the full price. No discount, no shortcut, no exception. But the reward for the sacrifice is you whole at last, not fragmented into 1,000 pieces, not scattered in 1,000 contradictory directions, not at the mercy of every algorithm or primitive impulse. You sovereign over yourself. You concentrated into a single force. You operating at the high frequency that nature always intended, but that modern culture deliberately taught you to fear as if it were a pathology. And when you achieve this, not perfectly because human perfection does not exist, but substantially, you realize something that changes absolutely everything in your life experience. The world does not surrender to you because you deserve it based on some moral criterion. It surrenders because you have become genuinely irresistible, not just sexually, existentially. You have become concentrated force navigating an infinite ocean of collective dispersion. You have become cutting clarity in a world suffocated by chronic confusion. You have become dense, real presence in an entire society of absentees performing life on social media. And presence, real, sustained, powerful, unbreakable presence, is the rarest and most valuable thing in contemporary human experience. More statistically rare than genetic talent. More valuable in practical terms than inherited money. Because true presence cannot be bought in a store. It cannot be inherited from family. It cannot be convincingly faked. It can only be painfully built through the alchemical fire of internal transmutation. And those who have real presence have access to everything. Because everything, opportunities, relationships, resources, influence, flows naturally and inevitably to those who are truly and completely present. So the final question, the only one that really matters right now, is not, does this actually work? You already know it works. You have felt the truth resonating in every section of this script. It is not how long does it take to transform, because time will pass inexorably anyway, with or without your transformation. The real question, the only one you need to answer with brutal honesty right now is, are you strong enough to withstand the immense power that comes from conscious restraint? Are you brave enough to willingly pay the high price of sovereignty? Are you courageous enough to walk through the dark night, knowing that the overwhelming majority of people will judge you harshly for choosing a lonely path that they don't have the courage to even consider? Because the world is literally overflowing with people who know intellectually what they should do but never actually do it, who perfectly understand the abstract concept but cowardly shy away from the uncomfortable practice, who sincerely admire transformation when they see it in others but reject it in terror when the opportunity knocks on their own door. And these people, these millions of people who knew but didn't do, will inevitably die carrying the most bitter and destructive regret that exists in human experience. Not the fleeting regret of what they did wrong, but the eternal and excruciating regret of who they could have been if they had had the courage. You don't have to be one of them. You have a choice now. You have everything you need right now. You don't need any more information. You don't need any more philosophical theory. You don't need another motivational video. You have deep understanding. And genuine understanding without subsequent concrete action is just sophisticated intellectual entertainment. It's just another subtle form of distraction disguised as growth. It's just another clever way to indefinitely postpone the only thing that really matters, starting now. And starting doesn't require any grand heroic gesture. It doesn't require a dramatic public announcement. It doesn't require a miraculous overnight transformation. It just requires a simple but definitive decision. Now, not tomorrow when you are more prepared. Not Monday when the week starts again. Not when external circumstances magically improve. Now. Because now is the only real currency you truly possess. And every now you waste by procrastinating is an irreversible piece of life that never ever comes back. Schopenhauer was absolutely right. Suffering is inherent in human existence. You will suffer anyway. That is the non-negotiable and inevitable human condition. There is no possible escape from suffering. The only real choice you have, the only genuine freedom available, is between two fundamentally different types of suffering. The suffering of chronic dispersion, empty, meaningless, which only generates more emptiness recursively, or the suffering of conscious restraint, with clear purpose, which forges character, which transforms essence, which rebuilds you into something capable of enduring and creating authentic beauty in the midst of existential chaos. One type of suffering passively consumes you until there is nothing left. The other actively builds you up until you become strength. One fragments you into 1,000 unrecognizable scattered pieces. The other unifies you into a single powerful concentrated force. One leaves you on the same mediocre frequency as everyone else, complaining endlessly that life is difficult, but doing absolutely nothing concrete to change it. The other elevates you to a higher frequency, where difficulty becomes creative raw material, where obstacles become disguised opportunities, where pain becomes fuel for transformation. So choose, consciously, deliberately, not because someone told you to, not because it will be easy or comfortable, but because you finally understood with crystal clarity that the alternative, continuing exactly as you are, scattered and fragmented, is absolutely unbearable, and that any temporary pain of transformation is infinitely worth it to escape the permanent and silent pain of living entire decades below your real potential. The journey begins now, or it never begins, and you die wondering. Now I want to hear from you. At what point in your life did you realize you were wasting your energy on something that wasn't worth it? And what happened when you finally stopped? Leave your comments here. This reflection may be exactly what someone needs to read today. If you've made it this far, you've already taken a step beyond most people. You watch the videos. You reflect on each idea. Remember, success is a decision. The choice is yours. Count on me and follow the white rabbit.